Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by the Little Shaman Healing. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about hidden forms of aggression. When people think of aggression, they tend to think of overt aggression, things like yelling, screaming, hitting, or other physically intimidating types of behavior. However, aggression can take many forms, and not all of them are as obvious as, say, hitting somebody out of anger. Most of the things we're going to talk about would probably be termed as passive-aggressive rather than overtly or assertively aggressive. People often ask how passive-aggressive behavior should be interpreted. It should be interpreted as anger and hostility. Passive-aggressive behavior should be interpreted as aggression because that's what it is. People who engage in passive-aggressive behavior are choosing, for whatever reason, not to confront the situation directly, but are instead expressing their hostility and anger in other ways. For example, hoarding can be an example of passive-aggressive behavior in some situations. The hoarder is angry or hurt, but instead of standing up and confronting the person that hurt them or leaving the situation, they use messiness and filth as a way to get back at the person or the people in the home that they're upset with. They are purposely creating an environment that is dirty, ugly, uncomfortable, or even unsafe to make someone else unhappy. Of course, hoarding is not always the result of passive-aggressive behavior, but that can be a reason for it. Other examples of hidden or passive types of aggression can be all the things we would normally think of as passive aggression, such as excessive negativity, pouting, sulking, withholding, refusing to engage, and giving backhand compliments, like saying, "Wow, you look great in that dress. No one would ever guess how heavy you are." But it can also include excessive lying, sarcasm, trying to embarrass somebody, blame, the silent treatment, procrastination, feigned forgetfulness, such as pretending to forget to do something that's important or that they were asked to do, obstructionism, which is deliberately getting in the way of things getting done or purposely delaying things, chronic lateness, continuously agreeing to and then canceling plans or standing people up, or generally agreeing to do things that the person never does, and learned helplessness. Smear campaigns can also be forms of hidden or passive aggressiveness, especially if the aggressor is pretending to be loving or friendly toward the victim at the same time they're smearing their character. This is also sometimes known as relational aggression. You might notice that these things are all things narcissists are known for. This is because much of the behavior of narcissistic people is aggressive, both passive and assertive. They are angry people. They are controlling their environment and the people in it by every means at their disposal. A lot of times, the more passive and hidden forms of aggression are not actually recognized for what they are, and these are therefore not confronted by other people. If the behaviors are confronted because of the passive and subtle nature of this type of behavior, it's usually pretty easy for the narcissist or other type of passive-aggressive person to deny or claim that the other person is imagining things. Some passive-aggressive people may not even realize they're being aggressive, and they might deny it because they don't feel their behavior counts as aggression even though it does. They might also deny being angry because for whatever reason they don't want to have a confrontation. For example, if you ask somebody to make a phone call so that something can get done and they continually, quote, forget to do it, it would be very easy for them to deny culpability if you confronted them about that. They can very easily claim to have actually forgotten, and there's no way for you to prove that that's not true. Regardless of whatever your suspicions might be, if they keep saying they forgot, there's really nothing you can do about that. You can't prove it's not true. The end result will often be that instead of asking the passive-aggressive person for help anymore, you'll just simply do things yourself or you'll ask somebody else, which is most likely what the passive-aggressive person wanted in the first place. For whatever reason, they were unwilling or unable to refuse, so they simply didn't do what they were asked in the hopes that you would not ask them again. Many times, the very act of being asked to do something is enough to trigger anger in people, especially narcissistic people. They don't think they should have to do anything, and they often mightily resent the fact that they're asked. Learned helplessness, or what we sometimes hear called feigned inefficiency, works much the same way. With this type of behavior, a person deliberately fails or does a bad job so that they'll be excused from responsibility. We often see this with narcissists and other toxic types in the work environment, but it happens in interpersonal relationships as well. For example, if your narcissistic spouse doesn't want to clean, but you insist that they help out around the house, they might do a really, really bad job forcing you to re-clean the area yourself. This is not only an outlet for their aggression against you for even being asked to participate in such demeaning and menial tasks as cleaning, but it also creates a situation where they can claim they did their best, but it just wasn't good enough. Hopefully they did such a bad job that you're not going to ask them to do it again because they don't want to. They may claim to be inefficient with finances in an attempt to excuse their spending habits. The list goes on and on. Learned helplessness is especially destructive when it's used by people as a way to express hostility by deliberately failing to do a job that they are solely responsible for that no one else can do. An example of this would be a person that's responsible for the maintenance on a piece of machinery who deliberately lets it fall into disrepair, thus creating problems for everyone who relies on that piece of machinery. For example, if your narcissistic spouse is responsible for the maintenance on your vehicle and they never take care of it and the engine locks up and nobody can use it anymore. The goal of all of these behaviors is to express hostility and anger without a direct confrontation. A passive-aggressive narcissist, for example, who doesn't want to help out around the house, knows that if they simply say that, they're going to be perceived badly. Only lazy or selfish people don't help others, and this is contrary to the image the narcissist wants to project. I don't want to, or I shouldn't have to, is not a good enough reason. It's not a good enough excuse. It's considered unreasonable by other people, and it will make them angry. The narcissist knows that, so they create a situation where they can express their anger for even being asked, and also make it so that they do have a good enough excuse. I can't do this because I don't know how, or I'm no good at it. I'm not lazy or selfish, I'm stupid, or I'm incompetent. Therefore, you shouldn't ask me to do this again. If you do, you are being unreasonable because you've already proven that the way I do it is not good enough for you. This type of behavior accomplishes every goal. They don't have to help, they get to call the other person a bad guy, and they can't be blamed. It's important to recognize all the forms of aggression so that you can understand what's going on. As we said in the beginning of this episode of the show, a lot of people don't recognize forms of anger or aggression that are not overt or that are not assertive. So just to be totally clear, if someone is being passive-aggressive, whether they're a narcissist or not, they're still being aggressive. They are still being hostile and they're still being angry. Passive-aggressiveness is anger. These behaviors are motivated by hostility. This behavior can be subtle and hard to prove, but when there's a pattern of it, it's usually pretty easy to detect. The way to deal with this behavior is the same way you deal with all toxic people. No contact if you can, and don't react if you can't.